Right, thanks for bearing with us, everyone. I think we'll get started. Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us on this webinar on the proposals for 2 Creekside. This meeting, just to provide some context, it follows on from the public consultation process that we started last year. And as some of you may know, there were presentation boards on our website that were added in December, and a feedback survey that was open for around a month. We know that these are really important proposals with lots of local interest. So as we sort of move on from the consultation and as we prepare the planning materials, we wanted to offer this online meeting and give everyone a chance to meet the project team, hear from us directly, and answer any questions you might have. So just a few little bits of housekeeping before we get started. So my name's Adam McLaren from Canda Consulting. We're a consultation agency that have been supporting Artworks and the team, and I'll be acting as the host this evening. The team's going to give you a presentation, a short presentation summarising the plans and where we're up to in the process. If you have any questions you want to ask us throughout, and we'd really encourage you to do that, you'll see at the bottom of the Zoom screen the Q&A bar. So if you just click that and type in the questions there, I'll pick them up and we'll go through those at the end before we finish at 7 p.m. Any questions that we don't get to in that time, we'll look to email you subsequently. And if you still have questions after that, you can contact us via our phone number and email address that are on our website, and we'll answer these for you. I also wanted to let you know that we're recording this session as well with a view to adding it to our project website. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of housekeeping, and I will move on just to introducing the team quickly. So Simon, perhaps start with you.
Hello everyone, my name's Simon Fowler. I'm a planning consultant, works for Avis & Young, and we've been providing advice on the proposals from the initial pre-app stage when we first started talking to the council 18 months ago, now to that sort of final preparation and planning application that we're in. And you'll also find my colleague Kate Green on the call as well.
Great, thanks Simon. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm the project architect from Meath Design, and Alan Grieve is also on the call, who is our managing director from Meath Design.
Great, thanks Lauren, Alan. And Joel?
Hi, I'm Joel Matthews. I'm the pub landlord of the Bird's Nest pub. And I'll just give my point of view about the development. Thanks.
Great, thanks Joel. And I've also got my colleague Guy Emanuel from Canda with me as well. So great, with that, I'll hand over to Simon and we'll start working through the presentation.
Thanks, Adam. So I don't really want to sort of do too much on the site context, because obviously if you're sort of signing into the presentation, you'd be fairly familiar with it. But obviously the Bird's Nest is a pretty focal point of Creekside, and we've been very much aware of that from the get-go. The Artworks Creekside team, they've been embedded within the local community for a number of years, and they've been supporting the emerging creative businesses and that creative emerging quarter in Creekside. They've provided the shipping containers on the site of the back of number 2, and they're also owners of Creekside 3, and they've really sort of tapped into that, I think, that emerging community that's in Creekside, and bringing forward that cultural porter that's embedded within the council's aspirations for this part of Creekside. And obviously that's starting to slightly change now somewhat, because the council's bringing forward a new site designation, so you're sort of moving away from that employment only approach, and obviously looking at bringing mixed use schemes that have got residential developments in them, and that obviously also needs to protect the vibrant character of Deptford and that sort of very specific and individual character that's found along Creekside, and sort of talk about that sort of changing context. And you obviously, if you've taken a walk along Creekside anytime recently, you've obviously seen sort of the scale of number 1 Creekside, and that's sort of coming out the ground quite quickly, and also the Tide Mills site. And So what we've been looking at is you know, number 2 is a development site. It's something the council are comfortable with, but it's making sure that that development is the right type of development that keeps going with the objectives that we have as a development team. So that's creating new jobs, supporting the creative industries that have established in this part of the borough, and also keeping that character and that flavour of creative and small businesses that have flourished so nicely in Creekside. So our proposals, and we're obviously going to talk about number 2 now, but we're also sort of considering what could happen on number 3 as well. And we're also aware that the council's in discussions with the landowners of 5 to 9. So that's one of the things that we sort of have been wary of and thinking it through is making sure that we're considering the change in character to number 2 in a sort of master planned approach and taking on board how those other sites might be potentially developed as well. So right from the start, we looked at what are the main principles, what are the key objectives for the development proposals, and what are fundamental to a successful scheme, and what are the important parts of the character of the site that need retaining. Number 1, obviously, is the Bird's Nest pub, and that's why we've got Joel on board and making sure that it's a focal point of the community. And Joel's worked so hard in the last couple of years to keep it going. I think it's probably been the toughest time going for a pub business, and so sort of kept it going, kept it not quite limping along. I don't want to give Joel disservice there, but kept it going, and the proposals really make sure that long-term future of the Bird's Nest pub is safeguarded. It's a bigger and better pub, but it still keeps the same characteristics and vibe that it is such an important part of the existing pub. We obviously need to develop, given the employment designation, some high quality commercial space, and there's some flexibility in that, and I'll talk you through that shortly. And then also we're in a conservation area, so the scheme has to be well designed to respect the character of the conservation area. And ultimately, there obviously needs to be a bit of residential in the scheme to make it work financially. So there's 31 new homes, and they're across a range of tenures, some affordable. We're just working through those final figures at the moment. And last but not least, we've been working with the occupiers of the moorings on Creek, excuse me, along Creekside, and they've had upgraded and protected long-term mooring rights now. So that's something they didn't have, but they are gaining through the development proposals. So sort of fundamentally, we've worked with the council over a number of pre-app meetings, and we've looked at various different points. And the first one we want to talk about is the design. So this is the emerging proposals and what they look like from the east of Creekside, looking down towards the Bird's Nest pub. So this is the elevation and the frontage that you'll be facing onto Creekside, and you'll also see the relationship to number 4 there. So we'll go into it in a little bit more detail, but commercial units at the ground floor of this element, and then 4 floors of residential development above. And this is a snapshot of what that sort of frontage wrapping around the front of the site is looking. So you can see on the left-hand side the retained pub frontage, and on the right-hand side the pub at ground floor now extends into the space where the red bus is, and then a residential development over the top of that. And Joel's going to touch on slightly in a second how the existing character of the pub's going to be retained. But that's very much key and fundamental, is that we're going to be bringing forward a larger pub space, better acoustics, so you can have live music going on. That's going to safeguard that. We're keen to make sure that part, that fundamental character of the pub is retained. A bigger external pub garden, so getting better access to the creek. And then actually also having food facilities, which are an increasingly important thing to make a scheme viable. And we've been working with Joel from a very early stage to make sure that his vision for the pub is incorporated in the proposals. Joel, do you just want to pick up on that?
Hi. So a lot of residents are concerned that it was really bad for the pub. So it's important for me to say that, I support this development. I think it's a really positive thing. There's been many times in the past when the pub's future's been uncertain because of different landlords, different situations, circumstances that have happened So this really secures long-term future for the pub. There'd be a development of the pub included for the foreseeable future. And again, I feel it's only going to be a positive thing, the fact that it will still look exactly like the Bird's Nest from the front corner, from the entrance. You'll see the original features, the original brickwork, and then you'd walk inside. There'd be the original windows around the outside. And at the moment, there isn't really much. There's supporting columns, which most of the time get in the way of gigs. So the fact that that could be an open space would be an improvement. We moved the bar during coronavirus because we had to serve through the window to serve the garden. And we used original reclaimed bars and original sort of wood from churches, for example, church pews. So we've sort of learned how to recreate the original bar look, which it still feels exactly like the Bird's Nest, and we've already changed it. Things could be re-put down, like the original wood flooring. Again, we could extend bring back the horseshoe bar and extend it onto the bar we have now, where that wall would be removed into sort of the new venue area, which again would be a great opportunity for us to have a big venue area. People would be able to sort of sit and eat on one side of the pub, whereas on the other side they could be in the gig. So they're all positive, really exciting, positive things for the pub. Again, a kitchen, a bigger modern kitchen, maybe open plan, doesn't make it a gastropub, just makes it a traditional pub. People see the pub busy Friday and Saturdays, but those other days, those daytime Saturdays, midweek, where there's missing trade, and being a bigger, more attractive pub for a bigger range of customers, I think will just be a really big improvement for the pub. So that's my point on the subject.
I think the other point as well is making sure that the scheme's been designed so that any residential above the pub doesn't extinguish the ability for the pub to operate in the way that it's intended. So it's intended to be a live music venue, and that music heritage that's sort of long been associated with the pub can continue and actually hopefully be better, given that you can have better performing space. And hopefully that sort of explanation goes some way to explaining how those two uses will sit alongside each other. In terms of the sort of commercial space or that employment space, obviously Artworks have successfully integrated a lot of the shipping container users into the local area, and also those people within number 3. Their intention is to keep as many of those as possible, and that comes by giving this commercial space, making it as flexible as possible, so a range of different spaces and uses, and giving it a full fit out from the point of completion, which is something which is quite rare in development proposals. Ordinarily they're done to shell and core, but this one's actually going to be bespoke to the future occupiers of that space, and actually the aesthetic of it is going to be consistent with that industrial character of Creekside and other schemes further around Creekside, which have successfully reintegrated themselves into the character of Creekside. Excuse me. This slide just gives a sort of brief overview of what those units are going to look like. So, flexibility is the name of the game, and if there's an occupier who wants a large space, then they can have it. And you can also get down to a small bit as maker space, which I think are actually proving very popular in those shipping containers that are on site at the moment. So in terms of our process to date with the design, we've been meeting with the council regularly over the last 18 months, and we're in a stage now where they're positive about it. We've also been through the council design review panel, and they've had some helpful guidance as well. At one stage, we seem to go through an infinite stage of testing different options, but the scheme and the use of brick that you can see in that image is now consistent throughout the scheme, and something that we're very proud of, and hopefully is going to improve the conservation area improve the conservation area and actually be a real beneficial addition to the character of the area. So just to sort of start wrapping up, obviously I said we've got 31 homes, so they're mixed across a mixture of affordable tenures, and we're just working through that package at the moment, just to come to the most that we can achieve on site, and that could be a mixture of social rent or shared ownership products alongside your traditional private sale. But all of the units are well designed and get a benefit of a landscape space in the rear. I think it's probably also worth having a look at this and how the scheme relates to the scale of number one as well. And actually, it's much smaller than number one is looking as it comes out of the ground. And then just finally, briefly on sustainability, most schemes in London nowadays have to achieve the highest standards that the London Plan sets. So we're getting excellent BREEAM, high levels of carbon reduction and carbon emissions, and minimising waste from the development. And also, we're actually working with the Environment Agency in relation to the protection of the creek and that ecosystem that exists within that part. I think that might be it. Is that right?
Yeah, shall I just pick up those few points around consultations, just those last two slides? So I just wanted to give you some more context around the consultation that we've done so far, which you may have seen some publicity around late last year. So before this webinar, we've sent a letter to politicians, community stakeholders in the area, inviting them to meet with us, as well as a newsletter that's been sent widely in the local area, sort of providing a summary of the proposals and advertising our website, which is creeksideconsultation.info, and the presentation boards summarising the scheme are still on that website, so you can look at those at your leisure. And a feedback survey was open for around a month between December and January. For any further feedback you've got, you're welcome to get in touch with us, any comments and queries, and we'll get back to you. And yeah, it's just a few sort of stats and themes that have been coming up in the consultation so far. So yeah, the survey has been viewed by over 1,500 people to date, which we're really pleased by. I'm grateful for so many people taking the time to have a look through that. And we've received more than 180 responses so far. And we've just noted there some of the themes that have been coming up. So really strong support for the inclusion of affordable housing, people being very keen to see a minimal car use development, strong interest in the future of the Bird's Nest pub and understanding how that's all going to work, and also support for improving views and public access to the creek. So yeah, I just wanted to give you that snapshot and just let you know that consultation process is carrying on. You can see the contact details there on the last slide. So we really do welcome any questions, queries, comments that you want to get in touch with us with. So yeah, I think that's everything in terms of the presentation, Simon. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to go through with us? As I mentioned at the beginning, we've got the Q&A bar at the bottom of the screen. So if you do have anything you want to ask us, very welcome to write in there and we can answer it between us. Perhaps while we're waiting, we've got, yes, so we've got a question which we touched on in the presentation, but perhaps we can say a bit more about that. There's a question around, with the plans to expand the pub space, how we've been considering minimising the noise disturbance to local residents and how we're looking to balance that. Simon, would it be best for you to pick that one up?
I mean, with any planning application, the council will consider whether it's an appropriate use and if there's any controls that they will want to have imposed upon that. So that might be putting a particular decibel limit on the development, or restricting amplified music outside of a space, or restricting the hours of occupation of that space. So generally, that is a series of parameters that the noise of a development can sit within. And that's defined by British standards, and if the development is potentially going beyond that, then the council may look to put the conditions on that restrict that in a particular way. That being said, I think the use of the pub at the moment is the use of the outdoor space. It's quite a large outdoor space at the moment, which, if it was operating, would have people outside in that space to start off with. So I think probably it's a fairly consistent approach to what exists now, and I'm not aware if there's any particular concerns with how the pub was operating in potentially the summer when it was a bit nicer to sit outside. Ultimately, it's at the council's judgment as to whether there's an acceptable relationship with neighbouring properties, though.
Great, thanks, Simon. Just while we're waiting for any other questions to come in, I know that one of the key themes that came up in the consultation and sort of noted on that last slide was around access to the creek and how that might be changing. So I wonder if we could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that the council's been keen to see, and at the moment the creek is, unless you happen to live on one of the boats, you don't get very good access onto that creek space. And one of the elements about the proposals that we've got is enhancing that pub garden space and bringing it closer to the creek so people can sit there and they can enjoy the creek as well. And we sort of work quite hard to make sure that any existing residents on the boats, they're not prejudiced by having people sat close to them. So the pub, the edge of the beer garden is brought away from the boats, so there's a degree of separation. There's no public access into the site because obviously that space is private, and we've worked with the boat owners to make sure that they've got some private space now in that rear courtyard area, but also there's some rear courtyard space associated with the proposed flats. What we are introducing, which is something which probably isn't great at the moment, is glimpses through building towards the Creekside. So if you're walking along Creekside, heading west to east, you'll be able to see the creek that way. So hopefully from a sort of visual point of view, from a practical enjoyment point of view, the relationship to the creek is going to be improved for the public and hopefully for those who are using the pub as well.
Thanks, Simon. Haven't seen any other questions come in, so yeah, feel free to put in the Q&A anything that you might want to ask us. And while we're waiting for that, one more thing I thought I'd mention is just perhaps if we could talk a little bit more about where we are in the process and in terms of planning and what people can expect to see happening next.
Yep. So as I said, alluded to in the presentation, we've been through quite a lengthy pre-application process with the council. We've sort of probably 18 months or so in negotiations with them, and we looked at various different options, tested different massing approaches, different layouts of different commercial uses, how they front out onto the street, and then we've got into a real detailed discussion over materials and the best way to treat the external appearance of the buildings, and that people will be able to see when the final application goes in just how those extensions and the retention of the facade of the pub really relate together, and I think it's looking really smart. As with any consultation process, we generally only tend to go out at this sort of final stage where we're comfortable with the scheme. We know there's some certainty about the council support for it, but also it gives people an opportunity to make comments and potentially influence how the scheme is being brought forward. That being said, the scheme is fairly fixed at the moment. There's unlikely to be any substantial changes. It is what it is. It's the retention and an enlargement of the pub, retention of the facade of the pub building, and then commercial and residential development. So we're putting the final touches on the planning application, and we're expecting that to be in with Lewisham in the next fortnight. And then once it's in, go through the council's own process, and then the council's consultation should probably start, I would imagine, at the beginning of March, and that will run for a period probably in around about a month. So March will be most likely the consultation process from the council's perspective.
Great, thanks, Simon. And we just had one more question come in, touching on that point earlier when we sort of showed the map of the different Creekside developments around any information that may be available regarding the neighbouring Creekside developments. As I understand it, they're in quite early stages, but more information may be coming forward in future.
Yeah, so on that slide there was a sort of a layout plan of how that Creekside could come forward. That's very much indicative for stuff which is outside of number 2 Creekside. There are proposals that we've looked at for number 3, and they're a little bit way off from being in the public realm. We're still doing some testing, and I know that there are potentially some development proposals at the 5 to 9, but they're nowhere near fixed. So those proposals aren't in the public realm. And if there's been any images of layouts or anything like that, stuff which is outside of number 2 site, they're entirely indicative and don't represent what a development proposal could be. That's just our musings and our suggestion of what could be, rather than anything definitive.
Great, thank you. Right, one final call for questions. Any of the other attendees want to ask anything else, you're very welcome. Otherwise, we'll move to wrap up. Hopefully this has been helpful in terms of just talking you through the proposals, understanding what different people in the team do, giving you some more context around the future of the pub in particular, and answering some of those questions and comments that came up during the consultation process. As I mentioned a couple of times, the lines of communication on our consultation website remain open, and we'd encourage you to get in touch with any comments or questions, anything you want to discuss, please do, and we're very happy to talk through. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And Simon sort of set out what's going to be happening next with the process, but we'll certainly keep you updated in the coming weeks and months around how that's going. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone.